Welcome to MSP 1337. I'm your host, Chris Johnson, a show dedicated to cybersecurity challenges, solutions, a journey together, not alone. Welcome, everybody, to another episode of MSP 1337. I'm joined this week by Augie Staab of TD Synnex. Augie, welcome to the show.
Thanks, Chris. Excited to be here today.
So we've been talking offline before the show recorded or started the recording of what does it mean to be an MSP in today's threat landscape. And as you were sharing a little bit about your role, and I'll let you give the more full version because I know I will butcher it, especially when it comes to your two-page title, which I think is also becoming very common in our space. The MSSP landscape is constantly being targeted for what they should be doing and how they should rebrand themselves and re-identify, and shifting from the break fix or business models that maybe don't align specifically with what our opinions around what an MSP or MSSP should look like. But by and large, we know that if they exist, they've got something figured out, or they wouldn't be here. And
Right.
So I'd love to hear you give us a background a little bit about your role and kind of how we can get into talking about, what are MSPs doing today? What are you guys seeing at TD Synnex, and how we can share with the MSP audience, some opportunities that might exist that they aren't aware of.
Absolutely. So a little bit on my role. My title, as you said, very, very long, is the Senior Manager for Go-to-Market Solutions Strategy. That's a lot of words, but our team is actually fairly new. It's a new concept, and I think the background of how it was created will really set the tone on how we see MSPs evolving in today's landscape. So traditionally, my role actually was associated to vendor-specific strategy. So previously, our strategy team, we would be assigned to vendors. I came from the cybersecurity space, of course. That's, I think, part of the reason why we're talking today. I have an affinity for cybersecurity. But what we did was we bridged the vendors' channel expectations to our extensive reseller base. So some vendor would come to us, they'd say, hey, here's the ideal partner that we want to work with. We would say, okay, based off of that IPP is what we call it, ideal partner profile. Here's the subset of resellers we work with that meet that criteria. And then here are all the different enablement services, programs, initiatives, things that they needed to take into consideration for incremental investment to be successful with enabling those partners. Now, that was in a silo by cybersecurity by itself. And as you've probably seen, and throughout many interviews, we've seen an evolution of how all of our partners, including MSPs, are going to market, which is no longer servicing one specific technology. We call that pointed solution sales. Now we're seeing more outcome-based solution sales, where partners are talking to their customers and they're saying, what is the end objective that you're trying to go to? Oh, you want to have a hybrid network with this many devices on it. You want to ensure it's secure, and you want to have these types of workforce applications on it. Great. That is a very different story in enablement, to actually get a partner ready to sell a solution instead of just saying, okay, here's vendor ABC, here's their SKU, here's your security service, and they move along. So now we have a team that's dedicated towards that. My team is structured by solution area. So we have someone in cloud, security, data AI, endpoint, MSP, so on and so forth. And what they do is they curate and advocate for us to create enablement programs, paths, tools for our resellers to take advantage of to accelerate an adjacent technology pillar within their established practice, which is exactly where I see MSPs this day. We're talking about security previous to hitting record. And one of the components is there's this, weird battle in between, should MSPs just strictly focus on security, or is it something that they should have awareness about? In my personal opinion, and the stance that we take is, if you're not aware of security, you're leaving an opportunity at the table, as well as potentially putting your business at risk. So our whole focus on the MSP, and we call it MSP Evolve, the program that supports this, is saying, so they're evolving, MSP Evolve, I think that's kind of fitting, is let's say your established practice is a true MSP. You're working on network management and configuration. You're ensuring that the devices are online. We're going to also talk to them about network security applications or tools that would stack on and add incremental value to their established business. So it's not necessarily them becoming specialized in security, but it's becoming aware enough to ensure that they have some layer that they can service if in the case that it's critical for them to do the security within a deployment as well.
Yeah, I mean, at the end of the day, if an MSP isn't configuring devices or endpoints with cybersecurity as a focal point, like, hey, we know we can't leave something unpatched. We know we have to put certain tools and services in place, or we're jeopardizing the longevity of either the business we're serving being still in business, or our own as a result of what might be backlash or impact directly to the MSP's business. You said something really interesting about aware, and I think one of the things that's interesting about using the word aware when it comes to cybersecurity is I think we're probably at a point in 2025 where most MSPs have an awareness of the challenges that both their clients and their own staff, their own organization is facing. But what we see a lot of is not recognizing that the threat landscape and the threat actors are not concerned with the size of the MSP. They're not concerned with necessarily even how much money or even client reach that they might have. They just see them as another opportunity to take their money, take their data, and recognizing that your data is worth something, even if you don't see value in it today. To your point, it's more than being just aware, right? Like being aware of what's offered is, I think, where there's still limitations of, I had no idea I could get that for that price point, which is within my budget, parameters, or I had no idea I could outsource that to a third party, or that those third party services were even a thing. What are you seeing when it comes to offering, services and tools that go a little bit beyond probably what is the comfort level of the majority of MSPs? That MSP that's sub 10 employees, they're not going to be able to just dedicate a resource to standing up whatever it is in the cloud or even in an on-prem environment. What are you seeing there?
So where I see things as it relates to that, I think is a very unique point of view. And I say that because as a distributor, one of the biggest values that we bring our partners is the ability to fill any gaps within a portfolio or their technical capacity. So a lot of times whenever partners come to us and let's say they are a 10-man MSP shop and they don't have the bandwidth or the time to fully scale and invest in bringing in a cybersecurity expert or having a resource dedicated to that, they would look to us. And that's where I think there's something very strategic going on. So I said MSP Evolve earlier, and that actually relates to a program as well as to a council and community of MSPs that are within our very, established stack of resellers. And we basically listen to the pain points that they're having, and we try to advocate and generate programs to support that. One of the themes that has become more prevalent is looking to partner with other MSPs or other MSSPs to help mitigate some of those gaps, and as well as do knowledge transfer on how to potentially upstand reoccurring security services that are cost effective. I think that's really interesting for one reason. I said that I grew up in the cybersecurity space, and 8 years ago when we tried to form councils of resellers to talk to each other, talk to us, give critical feedback so we can continue to ensure that we're supporting them in the ways that are necessary, it was very hard to get people in the security space to talk to each other about it. It was almost like they were sharing their secret sauce. And I'm finally seeing those silos break down, especially in the MSP space. They're no longer wanting for us to come in and say, hey, here's what you should do with your business. They're wanting us to bridge connections. And they're wanting to say, hey, if someone my size, my characteristics that is successful in security, can you bridge that introduction, and can we work together to learn and share best practices as it relates to being able to support a security infrastructure?
Well, it's interesting you say that, because I think, to your point about the unwillingness to share, I think we saw a lot of this when we saw the print copy space sort of converge into the IT world, where, the MSP or VAR or whatever you want to refer to the group that was, providing the IT services into the SMB or I mean, all the way up. I mean, you saw it in all different capacities of size of organizations, but you get that phone call like, "Hey, we need an IP address for this copier." You're like, "Who
Right.
is this?" Well, we're the copier guys that your client just signed a, $1 million contract with. And you're like, "Man, it would have been nice if I'd have been a part of the conversation, let alone knowing that I'm now part of the solution and I have to, provide services." And I think there was a lot of resistance. And you could have probably picked any category. Another one would have been the voice convergence of taking phones from being a standalone solution to becoming, converged with my computer. And you're seeing things now with like products like Zoom and Teams that aren't even that have added the voice function as a direct competitor in some respects to the existing solutions that are out there. And it got me thinking. I was at a phone event a few weeks back as channel partners,
Mm.
and the number of companies that were selling some sort of phone solution. And and I'm looking at these devices and I'm like, wow, that's a pretty awesome. Oh wait, when I go to get in the car, I run out of cord before I can, actually get to my car and realize that this isn't going to work beyond that physical boundary, right? And that doesn't mean that there isn't a place for it, but you see over and over again where there's this resistance to having the conversations between those different groups. And now you see it more specifically with MSSP versus MSP, and you hear this all the time. An MSSP is going to take all of my business. The
Mm-mm.
reality is an MSSP does not want your business or 99% of what you're doing. And to your point, they bring a value that an MSP can now bring back to their clients that otherwise would be, I am potentially going to lose this client, or worse, I'm going to have an incident as a result of not being able to provide the security services that are needed. And I don't even know where to start. And to your point about the community side of this, I would argue in the last 2 to 3 years, the community space has really come alive and is even talking to other communities where it's like, I remember
Yes.
the days when it was like, oh no, that's a ConnectWise community, or that's a MSP Ignite, or fill in the blank with whatever peer group / community it might be. And they're like, well, why would we talk to them? We have our own community. And it's like, yeah, but these communities are growing up also in some respects siloed from what's happening in other communities, that if there isn't a convergence even there, the problems would have continued. But we're seeing that in the last 2 to 3 years, and I'm sure you're seeing similar. Um, they're asking each other questions about how to, like you said, provide an outcome that's desirable for the client, that gives them the warm fuzzy of being able to sleep at night, not necessarily the, oh man, if we could just sell 5 more of these firewalls this quarter, we'll be in great shape for, our revenue and our budgets for, 2025. Are you seeing that change too, where the mindset shift is happening? Like even like, I look at who the MSPs serve, and the questions that come up a lot are, well, they'll never buy this. They think they're too small for this. The insights, continue on number of excuses of largely not in budget, don't care about my data. Um, I'm too small for it to happen to me. But as you were describing outcomes based solutions, well, that has to be shifting as far as those questions or the resistance to the solutions.
No, you're 100% spot on. And that's really where the team was born from, was that mindset of being able to bridge connections in between different partners, different MSPs that have a specialty in a different technology pillar. One of the ways that, we're helping bridge those gaps too is something that we call partner health and fitness. So one of the great things about being where we are in the market is we have visibility to thousands of resellers across cybersecurity and networking and endpoint device and all the things that you might have a specialized MSP from. And what we're able to do is use some of our proprietary data to identify different actions, characteristics, buying patterns, even partnerships with vendors that relate to each technology pillar. So we take all that information in, and we're actually debuting this at our high growth conference in Los Angeles here next month, but we're actually giving partners their own personalized report on their business. And let's say I'm an MSP, I get my report and it says, hey, you are proficient in infrastructure, you're proficient in cloud, hybrid cloud management and cloud infrastructure, but you're lacking in security. They could take that report and go to one of our experts on the team that will be there at a concierge desk and say, hey, my report told me that I need to strengthen in cybersecurity. And that person can help bridge a connection either to an internal resource or a reseller that they can partner with and somewhat find a strategy to either have them mentor through that partner or utilize some type of TD Synnex enablement service to help bolster their cybersecurity. But on the flip side of that, you're talking about the cost. There's always people are worried about, okay, well, if I add another technology and I'm adding in another service, whether that's through a co-opt partnership or they're actually taking on the investment internally, that's another cost that I'm already going to have to negotiate with my customer who, well, let's just all say it, these days are very, very hesitant to increase their IT budgets. And one of the points that we always make with MSPs and where we're really seeing it is it's either overcoming cost or it's risk. It's one of the two.
Right.
So we're increasingly see these MSPs are having more and more liability put on them if they don't have security as a focus, whether that is cyber insurance or data backup, things of that nature. Because as you said earlier, threat actors don't care. They are just seeing it as an additional entry point and that they're seeing that end user's data as something they can gain, take advantage of, and make some money off of. So you're 100% correct where we are finally seeing those silos break down. And that is what our entire aggregated solution strategy is centric to, is how can we make it easy for partners to bridge the connections or enable their current business to be able to adopt something that's an adjacent technology pillar.
Sure. One of the things that, you talked about the report and, where they might be, have gaps. In your report, are you looking at not just how they position product services with their clients, but also how they are ingesting or embedding those same products and services within their own, within the MSP itself? Like, I'm going to deploying these XDR and EDR solutions to all of our clients and it's amazing. And you ask the question of like, has it been deployed internally? And they're like, it's amazing.
We actually don't look at their internal. I will say that from an education standpoint, though, we always preach, practice the basics.
Sure.
So, and in that case, a lot of times when we're talking to people who have a cybersecurity focus, it's very rare and few in between that I've ever found someone who does not practice what they preach per se to their customers, because at the end of the day, basics is really what gets the job done. Not only do you need to have that internally, but you also need to teach people about how to mitigate threats, because it doesn't matter how many cybersecurity solutions you put in place. If you don't know how to identify a phishing attempt or a vishing, smishing, whatever they're calling it these days, right, then it's all in vain.
Wailing.
Yeah. So when it comes to resellers and MSPs and their enablement, whenever we are educating them, of course, we're talking to them about what's going on in the market, what we're seeing and what solutions they can offer to mitigate those threats. But we also talk about preaching the basics and internal health of their own cybersecurity practices and ensuring that they adopt them. Because if they don't, then they're at risk.
Right. And it would seem that, the report probably doesn't need to dig into the internal environment. If you are showing in the report that they're lacking in areas like cybersecurity, there's probably a very good chance that that's also true internally. I mean, I think about, areas that MSPs gravitate towards, like if they're not doing a lot in the cloud space, they probably aren't doing a lot of their own infrastructure in the cloud just because that's not their area of comfort, which kind of goes back to what you said earlier about the making sure to partner them up with a complementary, whether it's a vendor or another MSP, MSSP. How does that work? Like, I feel like, if someone came to me, this would have been when I had my MSP, like, hey, from a vendor perspective, it oftentimes was a very easy conversation. You've identified a gap that I have. It's something that needs to get filled. You can show me the ROI. You can, explain how it's reducing my risk, those kind of things. But when you bring in another MSP or MSSP, I think even still, there's these hesitations that crop up that would say, can I trust this? Not that they can't trust you, but
Mhm.
trusting that once the handoff happens, does that, as it was said by Reagan, trust but verify. Like, this is kind of a scary time to be like throwing eggs into somebody else's, especially with the cost of eggs, throwing eggs into somebody else's basket, right?
Yeah.
Like you're really putting a lot of trust somewhere. And when we talk about cybersecurity, like we don't get any room for mistakes.
Sure. So there's two different ways that we bridge those connections. One is through the council environment with MSP Evolve, and I want to say that one first because it's actually fairly new. MSP Evolve in its creation is not, but doing a co-op through the program is. That is actually feedback that we had received of how partners wanted to continually be serviced less than a month ago. I think it was at Channel Futures is when we held that council.
Gotcha.
And so now it's working on creating those environments where we have a council of people with the team in the room to share best practices. It's not necessarily at the moment us giving them the keys to the kingdom as it relates to that partner then forming a formal partnership and then going out and helping them deploy security. That would be our second avenue. The second avenue would be through our services division. And the way that we help mitigate risk there, whenever we're partnering them with another service provider, is there's a stipulation in how we contractually bring them on board, basically saying that if you want to be one of the third party service providers on our list that we bring into a conversation when there's a gap on MSP's portfolio, you have to basically only have 99% of your business focused in that area, as well as you cannot be listed as the incumbent. So it truly is a plug in, play, help them fix that one gap that they have, and then they go to the next opportunity. So we do have some.
I like that.
Yeah, yeah.
So question, and we have a few minutes left. I'd like to shift gears a little bit and talk a
Sure.
little bit about, the basically you're identifying the wheel and lots of spokes and lots of ways to bring stuff together. Something that comes up quite a bit, and more so recently after hearing things like, please fill out the insurance questionnaire, and it will ask questions like, please name the individual responsible for your network, and they're like, it's the third party, my MSP, or whatever it might be.
Mm-hmm.
Do you guys see a lot of, I mean, I feel like with what you just described, that you probably have a huge opportunity to help MSPs with that responsibility matrix, the RACI model. Maybe that's a little bit extreme, but like, who has responsibility and who is accountable? I mean, I would think that if I'm the MSP bringing in these services, the responsibility might rely on that third party, but from an accountability standpoint, I'm still the one on the hook.
Yeah. So it's all contingent upon what the MSP wants to agree to. That's one of the key pieces of it is we call it white glove or customized, because you can allocate as much information on who's actually facilitating that service as you deem necessary to the end user. So sometimes they'll be like, hey, this is so-and-so from company ABC. We partnered with them. They're going to provide this part of the service, and they're fully transparent. There are other times where company ABC, they white badge and they say they're an extension of our own company. And so it really is contingent upon what that MSP feels is critical or necessary for the relationship with the end user from a transparency standpoint. So, yeah.
And that's something though that you would walk them through.
Of course. Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
I think that's just a great learning opportunity. I think so many MSPs could really, that exercise in and of itself kind of goes back to, okay, the next time you fill out an insurance questionnaire or you help one of your clients fill one out, every one of those questions you should be asking yourself, like, is this me, or is this something that I'm willing to, how do I create that extension out to, whether it's a third party from a vendor standpoint or third party from another MSP standpoint, because it can get complicated fast. And I think if I've seen anything happen in recent months, is that trying to be everything to all of your clients is ending up being nothing to at least one of them.
Sure. No, you're 100% correct. And I also think it's adding in a layer of comfortability, especially with, you said it best. They get hesitant. They're worried that opportunity, if the MSSP comes in, they're going to take it and then they're going to, foster that relationship with their end client and move on. I think giving them the ability to determine what the amount of information that's necessary for that one deal helps them feel a little bit more trusted that they have control and autonomy with it. So,
It's kind of like the age old comment of, if nothing's broken, then what do I need you for? And that was the mindset, right? Five,
Yeah.
10 years ago, there wasn't a ton of client interaction with the MSP, because if it was working, great, that's what's supposed to happen. And some did this better than others, to have those touch points and checking in. But that really was just going above and beyond. That was more of that white glove service, to what you said earlier. But today I think it's different. Today I think you have to be involved all the time. Are you seeing the stickiness change as a result of MSPs being able to layer in additional services that maybe they weren't qualified for, or maybe they're qualified for, but they just can't get the staffing to help them, shift to that next level of like, okay, FTE resources, no problem. We had extra employees to begin with.
No, I'm definitely seeing them stay involved within the process, at least from, the opportunity start to finish. From the customers that I have spoken to personally that have leveraged some type of third party to fill or mitigate a gap within their portfolio, they want to stay involved. And I think it's twofold. I think it is still that trust, but I also think it's learning because,
Sure.
I always say that retention by repetition. They start, doing these opportunities using third party, and then they can identify maybe they're not ready to fully invest in one resource to be comprehensive, but they can invest half a resource to do maybe penetration testing or something that is a repeatable, easy to learn cybersecurity service that they can bring on board that they've seen many opportunities from. So they understand what the scope of work looks like, what the questions that are coming from their end user look like, and what the output and expectation of that service might be. So I definitely see them continually staying involved, and that definitely helps with the end user's trust.
Sure.
Because the word or terminology that we're using now is, it's not a if it's going to happen, it's when it's going to happen. And I think we're finally on the cusp where people are understanding that. And especially whenever you should see some of the resellers in the room's eyes, how big they get when we start talking to them about breach intelligence and some of the cost of what a breach has actually impacted enterprise and enterprise or end users in the past year. And it continues to just grow and grow. So it's, do you want to pay the cybersecurity, insurance premium, which is going to be a hard cost, or do you want to move forward and deploying some cybersecurity services that might be a little bit less of a cost, but would save you long term?
Yeah, it reminds me of, they say, what is it, that data exfiltration and, what the threat actors are up to will exceed GDP, I think they said by 2030. And
Yep.
I think we're well on our way to feasibly exceed those, lofty goals of the exfiltration. But to your point about recognizing that, even with things like, business email compromise, it's no matter how many times someone is taught how to avoid the phishing simulation, the reality is at some point we probably will fall victim to one of those emails, because they are just getting craftier every single time I see them. It's like they're not even typo squatting anymore. They're just writing a legitimate email, and they've managed to spoof somebody's email address, and they're doing a great job at showing me that it could in fact be real. And you're going, well, if is it real? I mean, to the point where it's like, why do we still use email? Like, it's the best thing ever. It's been around forever. It hasn't changed. Email hasn't evolved. We've added things to layer on top of it to help us, be less prone to the gaping trap door that's always open. And every time we go walking down the hallway, we know the hole's there. But eventually we got too many things in our hands and we forget where the hole is, and boom, too late.
Yep. No, we've seen it time and time again. And I think, obviously the growth of that is the introduction of generative AI.
Oh,
so,
yeah.
I've seen threats come through that have been on reseller company letterhead before. And it
Sure.
looks like a formal communication or correspondence on something they would normally send. And the only way that you've been able to identify that it wasn't actually from their domain was they would change the A character from like a normal A to like a Roman A. So unless you knew to look for something like hyper specific, you would never be able to identify that. It is fascinating how
Or
crafty.
unsubscribe. That's my
Hmm.
favorite. Like you're like, when did this newsletter start coming into my inbox? It's every day and it's annoying. And like, oh look, there's an unsubscribe, and boom, they now
Yep.
have your session tokens.
Yep. Yep.
Any last thoughts that you want to share with the audience as we wrap up for today's episode?
I mean, obviously being representative of TD Synnex, one of the things that we really love to do is help enable our partners. So, from this podcast, if anybody's listening and you're interested in MSP Evolve or the Partner Health and Fitness or any of the enablement services that we might have briefly spoken about in further detail, I'd say reach out. We have a comprehensive team that is able to support you, whether you're starting in cybersecurity or you're looking to bolster a practice there. And not just that silo, of course, AI, cloud infrastructure, endpoint. Now we're actually focusing as we see this new endpoint opportunity coming with the introduction of AI PCs. So, yeah, reach out. It's augie.staab@tdsynnex.com. I'm more than happy to bridge any connections, but I appreciate the time today, Chris.
All right. Well, thanks for being on. For those of you listening, this has been an episode of 1337. Thanks and have a great week.